He walked into the room like the space had been waiting for him all along. Dark suit, perfectly tailored, phone loose in his hand, that familiar self-satisfied curve to his mouth. Blake Hunter, the new owner. We knew the headlines about him. Young, ruthless, an aggressive buyer who collected companies the way others collected watches. But nothing in those articles prepared us for this. I sat with my notebook balanced on my lap out of pure muscle memory, because even on my last day, I was still wired to take notes, still ready to track tasks that no longer belonged to me. Beneath that habit, anxiety had already started to coil tight. HR was gone. The exits were guarded by two unfamiliar security men who hadn't been there the day before. "Let's keep this brief," Hunter said. "I don't enjoy wasting time." He spoke quickly, rehearsed, touching on the merger, the vision, the importance of stability as if those words meant the same thing to everyone in the room. Then he stopped. He took a step closer and let his eyes settle on me. "Women in leadership create uncertainty," he said quietly, "and I don't keep uncertainty on payroll." For a moment, I didn't realize I was the subject. Then it landed. The CFO was a woman. The commercial director was a woman. Legal was led by a woman. And within minutes, all of us were dismissed. No process, no documentation, just a flat instruction to leave. I stood not to protest, but because my lungs had stopped cooperating. "Linda," Hunter said, performing regret like a role he'd practiced, "you've contributed enough. Now make space for people who aren't afraid of pressure." I stayed silent, not out of restraint but instinct. I understood that anything I said would be twisted into proof of exactly what he claimed I was. As I left the room, Martha from accounting approached me, small and gray-haired, and rested her hand on my arm. "He thinks volume equals strength," she whispered, "but strength doesn't announce itself. It returns differently." I didn't know then that those words would become the spine of everything that followed. When I got home, I didn't bother removing my coat. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the dark television screen, convinced that if I spoke aloud, I would unravel, and if I unraveled, I wouldn't be able to put myself back together. It wasn't the job loss that hurt most, it was the shame of surprise, of silence, of not seeing the blade until it was already pressed against my back. Messages flooded my phone from people who had suddenly remembered me, shocked, outraged, sympathetic. I didn't answer any of them. I refused to become a headline in someone else's disbelief. The next morning, I woke early out of habit, brewed coffee, and asked myself the question that echoed louder than anything else. Who am I now? No title, no team, just a woman publicly dismissed to make a point. I went to the park without thinking, sat on a bench, and listened to the quiet. That's where I saw Claire, the former legal director, posture still rigid, hands clasped tightly together. "He had no right," she said before I could speak. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Sue a billionaire with an army of lawyers?" She finally looked at me. "We aren't alone. There are 6 of us, and there's evidence. Emails, minutes, recordings. A former HR manager who left before the purge saw lists. Only women." "You think anyone will care?" I asked. She held my gaze. "They will if we remind them, but only if you're willing." I didn't answer her then. That night I opened my notebook again, not to plan my day, to write a single line. He said I was a risk. I invested 17 years. He issued 1 order. Let's see whose gamble fails first. Sleep abandoned me days later at 3 in the morning. I left the window open, let the cold in, made tea, and opened the notebook to a blank page. "What do I know without doubt?" I wrote. Beneath it, I wrote that I was competent, that I wasn't weak, just convenient. For days, I moved with purpose. I called others who'd been dismissed. At first, it was conversation, then confession, fear, anger, questions with no answers. Janet asked if the law would protect us. I told her the law favored those who could afford patience. Claire refused to let that be the end of it. She gathered us in her living room, 6 women who once carried the company quietly on their backs. We held teacups like shields. She laid out what she had: correspondence, internal recordings, a witness who'd seen lists with women's names marked. Melanie asked if we could win. Claire said if we stayed silent, we'd already lost. Something broke open inside me then. Fear didn't vanish, but something stronger replaced it. I said we wouldn't scream. We'd move carefully, legally, methodically, by their rules, but for our survival. The next day, we named our group chat the Risk Team. It made us laugh, briefly. Claire handled the legal framework. We gathered evidence, stored it in layers. Steve called to warn me. "Hunter doesn't forgive disruption," he said. "You're dangerous now." I didn't deny it. I liked the word. We rented a small workspace on the city's edge, neutral ground. Claire arrived with folders that smelled like old paper and truth. We cataloged everything. One recording froze the room. Hunter's voice, calm and certain. "Women burn out. They have families. They're unstable." Silence followed. "This will matter," Claire said. We weren't ready for the press yet, but we would be. I noticed the black car outside my home after that. Not threatening, just present. I logged the plate number anyway. At our next meeting, Claire warned us plainly, "This will get ugly. Someone might leave. No judgment if they do." Martha looked up and said she was done waiting for permission. That night, we signed our intent to file. The following morning, my mailbox was open. Nothing missing, just open. I shut it and walked on. A warning without words is still a warning. We brought in Dana Reeves next. Federal background, sharp edges. She told us the truth. Settle quietly, fight loudly, or disappear. She looked at the evidence and said we had more than a case. We had leverage. 2 days later, my bank account froze. 4 days later, my husband was questioned at work. He asked if I was ready. I told him I'd been waiting, and we kept collecting. Martha found an old presentation buried deep in the archives. "Staff optimization," it read. "Outsource women's positions." Melanie collected layoff reports from the past 12 months. 89% of those who left were women. We assembled a folder, and I stuck a small note on the cover. "We're not raising our voices, we're raising facts." The first one of us broke after 9 days. It was Janet. She didn't come to the meeting and stopped responding in the chat. Claire went to her house and came back pale and silent. Then she told us that people had visited Janet's home. They didn't threaten her directly, but they made it clear her husband's job could be reviewed and her children could face problems with college. I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't. I just let out a heavy breath. Janet was the mother of 2 teenagers. She had no other choice. We removed her from the chat, from the correspondence, from the documents. No resentment, only respect. She did what she could. "We have to be prepared," Claire said. "Someone else may leave." "But I'm not leaving," I replied, "even if I'm the only one left." I didn't say it for effect. I just knew I couldn't go on if I backed down. A day later, someone smashed a window at our co-working space. The security camera had been disabled. The police arrived 3 hours later and said it was probably just hooligans, but the hooligans didn't steal anything. They only left a note on the table that read, "Women don't fight wars, they lose them." Martha's hands shook as she read it. Then she pressed her lips together and said, "I guess we've started a real war after all." Dana insisted we move temporarily. She had access to a private office in the center, safer on a secure floor, and we relocated. That same evening, Claire laid out the next phase of the strategy. filing a preliminary complaint with the State Labor Board, and publishing the material on a business blog read by investors and journalists. The article was written in a neutral tone, without names, only facts: layoffs, gender imbalance, corporate policy. We agreed. It was meant as a trial balloon, a signal that we were ready to talk. 2 days later, the article went live. It didn't cause an uproar, but there were hints in the comments. I wonder who they mean. If it's what I think, I'm not surprised. There was a time I also left because of this kind of management. We didn't reply, we waited. Hunter didn't respond either. Neither his press office nor his lawyers made any statements, and that worried us. He's not the type to stay silent without a reason. Then, that evening, my daughter called me. "Mom, a man came to my school. He said you were a hero. He smiled strangely. The teacher sent him away. Did he touch you?" "No, he just talked, but I was scared." I didn't tell her it was a warning. I didn't tell her that the smile was a dirty trick. I just hugged her when she came home and said, "It's not your fault. This is my war and I'll finish it." When I walked into the office the next morning, Claire was already at her desk, staring at her laptop. "We have a problem," she said, instead of greeting me. Hunter had given his first interview. We leaned silently over the screen. It was a short YouTube clip on a business channel. His face was confident, well-groomed, slightly tired. A PR specialist sat beside him. "We have always supported diversity," he said, "but we also have a responsibility to optimize our processes. Some layoffs were difficult but necessary. And yes, change is always painful, especially for those who can't adapt." Claire paused the video. He hadn't named us, but he made it clear. We were weak. We were bitter. I wasn't angry. I felt everything inside me harden, as if someone had switched on a cold light in an operating room. "Okay," he started. "Now we begin." The next day, we filed a preliminary complaint with the State Labor Commission. The document was signed by 3 of us: me, Claire, and Martha. Melanie would join later. We followed every instruction carefully, without haste, but with absolute precision. 2 days later, we were mentioned in a regional newspaper, a small piece, but with a blunt headline. "Former top managers accuse major investor of gender cleansing." No names were mentioned, but the calls started immediately. One of the first was from a man I hadn't heard from in 10 years. Douglas Brim, the former head of IT, had moved to Chicago long ago. "Linda, is that you? Are you really part of this?" "Yes." "I didn't think you were capable of this." "Neither did I until I had to be." He went quiet, then said softly, "By the way, I was in that meeting when Hunter talked about risky women. I have a copy of the minutes. I took a screenshot because I couldn't believe it. I'd appreciate that. Thank you." When I hung up, I realized we were no longer a small group. We had become a network. The louder he spoke, the more people remembered what they had seen, what they had stayed silent about, what they no longer wanted to hide. The morning after Douglas's call, I walked into the office feeling like the whole city was watching us. We had become a topic of real discussion, not rumors. Claire put a printout on the table, a list of people sharing stories online about toxic cultures in large companies. Some were from our former firm, some worked at Hunter's subsidiaries. "This is the beginning," she said. "It's a chain reaction. People want to talk, but we have to be the first, not just to talk, but to act." That day, we planned the next step. Dana insisted we formally notify the board of directors of the company Hunter had invested in, including copies of the complaint and documents, so they couldn't later claim ignorance. It was legal, but also moral. Silence meant complicity. The letter was dry, professional, precise. No emotion, only facts. A day later, a reply arrived. Short, neutral, legal. "The board thanks you for the information provided. In the event of an official investigation, we will cooperate." No apology, no position, just fear hidden between the lines. And that same day, the real blow came. Claire received a call from an unknown number. A male voice, calm and polite.
"This is not your war, Miss Harris. You're young and smart. Why ruin your life?" She didn't answer. She hung up. That evening, I received a letter. Not an email, a real one. Inside was a newspaper clipping about a woman who had gone to court and lost. Written in pen were the words, "The result is the same." I didn't shake. I wasn't surprised. I placed it in my file and wrote on top, "Fear is not proof. It's their argument when they have no others." The next morning, a woman came to our office unexpectedly. She knocked and introduced herself as Lena Montgomery, a former financial consultant on one of Hunter's projects. "I've been reading about you," she said. "I was fired too. No reason, no explanation, but I'll never forget how he told me. 'You're too confident for a woman. You scare our partners.'" She pulled out a folder. "I have documents. If you'll take me, I'm with you." We didn't know when he would truly strike, only that he would. We just didn't expect it to come through the press. A week after Douglas's call, a major business outlet published an investigation. The headlines screamed, "Anonymous accusations threaten the investment climate. Who stands to gain?" Inside were quotes from sources close to management, hints of personal motives, claims that women were ruining deals out of spite. No names, no direct accusations, just poison woven between the lines. "He's playing dirty," Dana said. "This isn't defense, it's an attack meant to make you look hysterical and bitter. We need to be ready." Claire stared at the screen without blinking. I knew that look. She was holding on, but barely. They were thinking strategically, but it was hurting deeply. "I can't read this," Martha whispered. "Then don't," I said. "Right now, what they say doesn't matter. What matters is what we do." That evening, we agreed to file a full lawsuit. Not a complaint, not a public letter, but an official lawsuit in state court. A complete set of evidence with signatures, receipts, everything. The next day, we submitted the papers through a trusted representative. On the way back, Claire said, "From this moment on, everything will be different. We're not just complainers anymore. We're plaintiffs. He can't ignore us."
He can only attack us. We were ready for that, and yet when my mother called me that morning, a woman who had always stayed out of my work, I was caught off guard. "Linda, what's going on?" "My neighbor stopped me today and said you're suing some billionaire. Are you really doing this?" I exhaled. "Yes, Mom." "Why are you doing it? You could have found another job, lived a quiet life." "I can't live quietly knowing that silence is approval, and I don't approve." She went silent, then said something I'd never heard from her before. "Then hang in there. Don't be afraid to be strong, even if you end up alone." And suddenly I realized I wasn't alone. Even when it was frightening, I wasn't alone. The lawsuit was accepted, and we received an official response. The case had been registered, and now everything followed procedure. Dana warned us it would drag on, that it would be exhausting, slow, and dirty. They would delay it, stretch it out, look for weak spots. "Your job is not to break," she said. "None of you, not in the media, not online, not at home. You are now the face of the process. Don't let them use your emotions against you." We divided the roles. Who would speak to the press? Who would handle documents? Who would stay in touch with new witnesses? Yes, we already had witnesses. After the first publications, 3 former employees contacted us, asking to remain anonymous. One of them was a former IT analyst who still had archived correspondence. He said simply, "I don't want my sister to end up in the same situation one day." That's enough. Then something we didn't expect happened. Auditors, an independent financial transparency organization, announced an internal audit of one of Hunter's companies. Our complaint was the reason. It was still unofficial, but enough for the media to notice. The next day, the news feeds were buzzing. "This is what he fears most," Dana said. "Money. When his capital is touched, he loses his balance." And he really did. A few hours after the publication, we received a response from his press service. For the first time, it was open and official. It stated that all personnel decisions were based on business logic, that some former employees had chosen confrontation, and that all allegations would be resolved within the law. Claire smiled. He's not ignoring us anymore, he's defending himself. That means we hit the mark. I didn't feel victorious, just tired. This fight had been going on for weeks. We lived in constant readiness, as if a fire could start at any moment. But there was one moment I remember especially clearly. That evening, I went into my daughter's room and kissed her forehead. She asked, "Are you going to win?" I thought for a second and said, "I don't know, but I'm not going to lose without a fight." The next week, we received notice of the date of the first hearing. It wasn't substantive, just an organizational one, a review of positions and presentation of the parties. But even that felt enormous. We weren't just talking anymore, we were being heard. The preparation was meticulous. Dana didn't let us out of her sight, rehearsing answers, repeating wording, giving clear instructions. This isn't an interview. This is a court case. Precision matters. No drama, just facts. The day before the hearing, we found broken glass in the parking lot near our office. Nothing was taken, they just smashed it and left. The surveillance cameras weren't working. We didn't report it, it had become background noise. But something had changed. We started receiving letters, not threats, but support. One woman from Texas wrote, "I quit my job a year ago after my boss said women in sales are a decorative risk. I didn't know what to do, but when I saw you, I remembered that silence doesn't heal." Claire read the letter out loud. Melanie wiped her eyes, and I simply said, "That's why we won't back down. No way." The courtroom was silent. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, looked at us with cold, businesslike focus. Hunter's representative, a polished, confident man with perfect hair, spoke with practiced politeness. "Our client does not admit any wrongdoing," he said. "All personnel decisions were made for economic reasons." Dana stood and handed the judge the first folder of evidence. "We believe the system was deliberately designed to exclude women from management positions, and we are prepared to prove it." The judge nodded. "Both statements are accepted. The court will consider the arguments at the next stage." When we left the courtroom, no one spoke. Then Martha said, "We did it. We said it out loud in front of everyone. It was only the beginning, but for the first time, I felt not just determination, but dignity. We didn't ask, we asserted. We didn't complain, we declared. And now it was impossible to stop." A week after the hearing, a man we never expected approached us, John Rowlings, the company's former internal auditor. We knew him from corporate events, quiet, unassuming, always with a tablet. He never interfered, never commented. This time, he made the appointment himself. He came with a yellow folder in his hands. "I'm not one to rush into battle," he began, "but I've been watching this for too long." He spoke about lists being drawn up, emails deleted, reports revised, then laid out internal correspondence summaries, dismissal diagrams, notes on emotional risk indicators, a special column that appeared only for women. "This isn't just your case, it's a system, a strategy." He spoke calmly, without drama, but every word landed. We thanked him, and he left as quietly as he arrived. Claire whispered, "We just got the key." The next day, a previously neutral news portal published an investigation, The Hunter Model, How Firing Women Became the Norm. The article linked to the court case, anonymous interviews, leaked data. We didn't know who passed it to the journalists, but the result was immediate. Hunter shares dropped first 3.2%, then more. One investor publicly froze participation, and for the first time, the board issued its own statement. The board is concerned about the situation, and internal review of human resources practices has been conducted. We emphasize our commitment to equality. "They're panicking," Dana said. "No one launches an internal review if everything is fine." That evening, Lena called me. "Did you feel it?" she asked. "Feel what?" "The turning point. For the first time, I'm not just hoping, I know we can win." I didn't answer right away, but after the call, I smiled for the first time in weeks. 2 days later, Hunter's lawyer made the move we expected, and it still hurt. He filed a counterclaim accusing us of a coordinated attempt to damage his client's reputation, interfere in corporate processes, and spread false information. "It's a tactic," Dana said calmly. "They can't stop you legally, so they're trying to scare you financially." But we were no longer trembling in the dark. We understood that if we gave in, they would win, and if we hung on, their structure would collapse under its own weight. The next hearing was crowded. Press, supporters, bloggers recording stories at the entrance. Hunter was there in person for the first time, sitting in the front row, jaw clenched as if holding back superiority. When I entered, he glanced at me, and I saw it clearly. He never thought it would reach court. He never believed that we, the women he called a risk, would be here, calm, confident, folders in hand. Claire presented new evidence. John spoke again, his voice quiet and precise. He didn't accuse, he showed. I couldn't pretend not to see anymore, he said. I saw names crossed out before performance was even reviewed. On my way out, a reporter asked, "Linda, how do you feel seeing Blake Hunter in the courtroom?" I looked her straight in the eyes. Equality. He was no longer above me. He stood before the law, just like I did. That was all I wanted. Those words made headlines, and the next morning our story appeared on the front page of a national newspaper. After the press release, we didn't expect silence. We knew there would be a response, but the form it took surprised even us. The day after the hearing, Hunter temporarily stepped down as CEO. The official explanation cited a pending internal audit and ongoing legal proceedings. The board of directors released a statement saying the company values its reputation and respects the principle of equality, and that until all proceedings were concluded, the CEO's duties would be temporarily transferred to the executive vice president. When Claire read this, she set the phone down and simply exhaled. We did it. But we didn't celebrate because we knew the real goal wasn't removing Hunter. The real goal was changing the system. Firing him didn't mean admitting guilt, and it was essential for the court to put a final stop to it. Meanwhile, the pressure intensified. Someone leaked our home address online. I moved my daughter to my sister's place. Martha left town for a while. Melanie deactivated her social media accounts. We grew quieter, but not weaker. While gathering documents for the next stage of hearings, we received unexpected news. The district attorney had launched a preliminary investigation into corporate discrimination. This was no longer just a civil case. It was a potential criminal investigation. Dana looked up from her papers. Now it's serious. If the prosecutor's office takes this on, it will set a precedent for the entire country. That evening, the whole team met again. No press, no lawyers, just us, the same risk team we once called ourselves. We drank tea, talked about the news, and sat in silence. Then Martha said she had always thought that at the end of her life she would want silence, but now she understood there was a silence that humiliated, and there was a voice that even as a whisper sounded like truth. She thanked us for helping her remember what her voice sounded like. We hugged. No tears, no drama, like a team. The day before the major hearing, I woke up at 5:12 a.m. The house was still, except for the old coffee machine groaning as it switched on. I pulled on a sweater, opened the window, and sat down to write. Not a report, not a document, just a notebook. I had been an operations director, then a shadow, then a threat. Now I was a witness, not because I was chosen, but because I didn't leave. The trial was scheduled for Wednesday, the day the court would formally hear testimony and accept the case for trial. We knew we couldn't afford a single mistake. A crowd gathered outside the courthouse. Posters, cameras, journalists. Someone held a sign that read, "Your voice is not a risk." I looked at Claire. She nodded. We went inside. The courtroom felt tense. Hunter's lawyer tried to begin with a statement claiming the case was built on emotions and unproven interpretations, and asking that the evidence be deemed insufficient. Dana stood calmly and said the case file was 437 pages long, with more than 100 pages of internal company documents provided by former employees. This wasn't about emotions. This was about a system and women whose lives were destroyed under the disguise of optimization. The judge listened, then, without changing her tone, said the court accepted the materials for consideration and that a preliminary hearing was expected within 6 weeks. Outside, cameras, questions, microphones surrounded us, but I felt no fear. I said we weren't seeking revenge, we were telling the truth, and if the truth frightened someone, that wasn't our fault. It was their mirror. The next day, I received a letter from the board of directors. Given the moral damage caused to the case and the company's reputation by the actions of the former CEO, they invited me to consider participating in a new initiative to build corporate ethics. We would like to invite you to join the supervisory board as well. I read the letter 3 times. I wasn't happy. It wasn't a victory. It was a sign. They understood. Now they were searching for a way to survive in a new reality. I picked up a pen and wrote back. I am open to discussion, but only after the final court decision. First the truth, then reforms. The verdict was announced on Friday at 10:06 a.m. The court found that the company's actions indeed constituted systemic gender discrimination. All evidence was deemed admissible. Hunter lost the case. The court ordered compensation for all participants and required the company to implement an internal gender equality policy under external supervision within 6 months. The courtroom was deathly silent. Even Hunter, sitting in the corner, didn't speak. He just stared at the table. We didn't jump for joy. We didn't shout. We sat as we had at the beginning, only now with our heads held high. On the way out, I was handed a microphone. "Do you feel like a winner?" I smiled slightly. "I feel like we've been heard. That's more important." 2 days later, the council called again. This time, it was official. They invited me to a meeting, not with an offer, but with a question. How can we fix what has been destroyed? I agreed. Not for status, but for the women who will come after us, women who won't want to remain silent. Claire launched a legal initiative to support those facing discrimination. Melanie went into teaching, training future financial analysts on how to recognize bias in algorithms and numbers. Martha moved in with her daughter, finally at peace. And I accepted the board's offer, but on one condition: I would have a team, women who experienced discrimination. We wouldn't just watch, we would change things. On my first day in the new office, I walked into the very same meeting room where I had once heard, "Women are a risk." Now, on the wall, there was a sign: "The strong don't cry, the strong come back, and they bring others with them." I sat at my desk, calm, confident. A new chapter began, without threats, without fear, but with a voice that no one could ignore anymore.